put the new one in the chat. 1 minute.
Okay, and I'll put the new one, copy, link. Okay, the new one's in chat now. So, Joshua, if
And
you
I
want to go
blasted
ahead.
it on Hootsuite.
Sweet.
All right. So do we want to start off with how Medicare for All would look in a pandemic situation like this?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we should give it the 3 minutes until we start at 6:30 and start off with just an introduction of what we're doing and why we're doing it. But yeah, that would be a good starting point, I would think.
Okay.
And then Joshua, you said you've already sent it out.
I wish. Instagram requires a picture, so I'm saving the picture that you used earlier, almost. Yeah. And now I have sent it out.
Okay. Sweet. Well, we'll wait till 6:30. And we'll go from there. This is pretty cool though to see it on. I see it on YouTube. Let me go ahead and mute my YouTube. Oh, it's muted. Okay. And there's what, about a 45-second delay?
When we were doing it yesterday, yes.
Yeah, give or take.
Okay, the screen didn't move when you talked, Sam.
Probably takes a second before it gets going. I
There
probably
you go.
spoke for too short of a time.
Gotcha.
Let me hold up.
Okay, somebody want to test out the chat function on YouTube?
All right.
Oh, hey, Noah.
Yeah.
Hit mute on your microphone when you're not talking. And I don't know if this will work the same on yours, but it does for all of us. When you want to talk, you can hold space and it's like a push to talk. So go ahead and try that. Can't hear you right now, so that might not work for you.
Yeah. Looks like it just doesn't work.
Okay, well, you'll probably just have to do that manually then, but that'll keep it from flipping over to you in seconds of silence.
Is there a way that we can change the YouTube video to look like this does in gallery view with all of us all the time, or no?
I don't think so.
Let me see. I'll switch it over to gallery view and to see if it does anything. I don't think so, but we've got like a 45-second delay.
I think it did when we tested it earlier.
Well, I'm on it right now and it doesn't seem like it's doing it.
Here's
there it
me
is.
talking
There it
about
goes.
gallery view, so we'll see.
Yeah, no, it's on gallery view now. I'm in the upper right, and
Yeah.
Noah, you're on the bottom there.
Okay. Oh yeah, I like
Yeah,
that more.
it switched.
Just because if people join and it's one of us talking, then they'll be like, who are you and where's Albert? You know, like who's Noah #housing first? I don't care about this dude. So.
Well, we do. We all care about Noah.
Oh.
So it's 6:30, and I think I want to go back to speaker view for this first one. I'm going to switch it back over to speaker view, and I'll go ahead and start off with an introduction. I don't know if we've got any viewers just yet on YouTube, but you know, this is Albert Lee. I am running to represent the people of the 3rd District of Oregon to the United States Congress. Today, we are speaking to you live from our various locations throughout the 3rd District, and it is because of the obvious issues that we are facing with COVID-19 at the moment. So we are practicing exactly what the health experts have been asking us to do, which is the social distancing. So throughout this video, this live stream, you're going to see some folks that are a part of our campaign who are monitoring and are going to continue to monitor the various social media platforms that we're on. Now, for this very first live stream, the folks that are on camera are really just going to be the folks that are a part of the campaign. You know, this is a first for us. This is something new for us to move forward as we count down the next 2 months to the primary. We're going to look to try to open this up so that we can have some more conversations with constituents throughout the 3rd District as we move forward. But for this first night, the format that we're employing is basically having staffers monitor the various social media platforms for questions that come up. And while we are waiting for questions to come up, what we will do is we will go ahead and start discussing different parts of our platform, giving you a little bit more background about who I am, why I'm running, and go from there. So without further ado, I just want to announce and acknowledge the folks that are on this live stream with me tonight. So I have Sam, Joshua, Merrick, and Noah, part of the campaign, all on. And if you guys want to go ahead and just quickly introduce yourselves one at a time in the following order: Sam, Joshua, Merrick, and then Noah. We can go from there. So go ahead, Sam.
Hi, I'm Sam. I'm a recent transplant to the Portland area. I'm currently working for Albert's campaign, mostly in a marketing and kind of digital social media standpoint. I'm just really happy to be here.
Hello, I am Joshua. I am the volunteer coordinator for Albert's campaign. A lot of the emails that you get regarding canvassing and such come from me. And I started working with the campaign back in November, and it has been awesome.
Hi, everybody. My name is Merrick. I'm here as a campaign staffer with Albert Lee. We're here to make a difference, hopefully make fight some of these issues like ending homelessness, shooting for Medicare for all. I'm glad to have all your support.
Hi, I'm Noah. I'm a campaign strategist here with Albert Lee. Born and raised in Portland. I joined the campaign back in, I think it was December of 2019.
Great. Well, thank you all for your quick introductions of yourselves. What I would like to go ahead and do at this point is just to give folks a brief overview of who I am and why I am running. So again, we are still working out the kinks on this. I think, Noah, you're going to have to mute yourself in order to switch screens. And then I think, are we good? Yes. Sorry for this. We are all trying to work through this and navigate this life as we know it at this point. So again, my name is Albert Lee. I'm running to represent the people of the 3rd District of Oregon to the United States Congress. I'm running because I believe that democracy requires choice. It is something we simply haven't had in this district in over a generation. We face a series of crises that have been allowed to fester and grow for over a generation that require bold action now and not just inspirational and aspirational words. I believe in the basic tenets of the Democratic Party when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think it is time that we uplift some new voices from some other backgrounds, from some other lived experiences to represent us here in the most diverse district of our state. Now, a little bit about my background. I'm a 6th-generation American and an immigrant at the same time. I was born in South Korea, where my African-American Army dad met my Korean mom during the Vietnam War. Now, I grew up in working class St. Louis, North County, St. Louis, next door to Ferguson. I'm a 1st-generation college grad, 1st-generation law school grad. But before that, while in high school, my family faced domestic violence, which led to our homelessness. I went to 5 different high schools in 3 different states. Between college and law school, I had worked or volunteered in the United States Army. I was selected to the Honor Guard at Arlington National Cemetery. Afterwards, I served or worked in international trade before moving out here to Oregon in 2005. Worked in project management. Eventually moved back to the East Coast to go to law school. And then when I returned with my family, we started a small business, and I would eventually become one of the deans at Portland Community College. Now, since we started this campaign last summer, I've stepped down from that position in order to make this run. Now, for me, the reality is we simply can't wait. We have a series of crises that have been allowed to fester and grow, including a homelessness crisis that when I first moved here in 2005 was a critical issue then. It is super critical now, especially in the age of COVID-19. We have the lack of affordable housing and the lack of living wages. The combination of those two things places way too many of us into the struggling class. And now, again, with COVID-19, we are seeing that this serious emergency stresses that way too many of us are already on the edge without an emergency, and now have gone over the edge with this emergency. I can go on and I can talk about a lot of other issues that have just simply been ignored or have been allowed to fester over these last 24 years. But for me, the largest one has been our climate emergency. We have 7 to 11 years to do something, anything to curtail the use of fossil fuels, to reverse the changes that are going on on our entire planet. For me, I've got a 6-year-old daughter who needs a planet to live on, a stable country and government to live in, and a life worth living. Now, when I talk about all of these different crises, I look at money in politics as really being the root of all of the issues that we face here in this district and across the country and around the world. When we have a government that is comprised of a series, the majority of people being from the 1%, who are bought off by wealthy individuals and corporations, we have the result of having a government that does not work for all of us, that works to, again, put the thumb on the scales for those at the very top, instead of having a government that truly works for all of us and not just those wealthy few. Now, you know, when we talk about all of these things, I think that the way you combat that is that you start sending one of us. We start sending folks that are going to actually do the bidding of the people and not those of the corporations. Those you need to send folks that aren't going to take the corporate contribution, who are not going to allow that kind of bribery to influence their thought and truly represent and fight for the people. So I know that, you know, like I said, this is the first of this series that we're going on. I want to kind of turn it over and try to get things going. I don't know how much we've got going on the various platforms, but I know that we've got at least one staffer on each of the platforms to take and monitor for questions. I'm going to go ahead and open it up and see if we've got anything to start with.
I have a positive note from YouTube. The Daily Ember commented they're here watching and they're excited for our interview tomorrow.
Well, we're looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to the interview with the Daily Ember, and I'm really appreciative of having the opportunity to speak to a wide variety of audiences throughout our social media, especially in this time when we can't go out and knock on doors, when we can't go out and talk to people face to face. I guess this is our alternative, and I'm looking forward to it. So kudos to the Daily Ember.
Well, we're monitoring and waiting for questions to come in from the various platforms, and I encourage you to go ahead and send your questions in, YouTube, Twitter, wherever we'll see them. I want to ask how the recent crisis affects your view on Medicare. Medicare has been a huge part of the national conversation over the past election cycle, and that was before it was a global pandemic. How do you see Medicare, and particularly Medicare for All, fitting into this COVID-19 crisis?
Yes. Well, I mean, you've kind of hit the nail on the head. This is a global pandemic. It is something that we are all facing globally. When you take a look at the different actions around the world, I like to look at the example of South Korea. South Korea has a universal single-payer Medicare for all system. They have been able to attack this pandemic head-on. They have been able to provide care and assistance to all of their people. And it is examples like this pandemic that really shine a light on the flaws of our system. You know, when we have an employee-based private healthcare system, well, hell, I mean, we've got folks that are losing their jobs right now, that are being laid off, terminated, just for the simple fact that things are shutting down, that we've got states that are shutting down. And once you have been terminated from your position, you are no longer linked to that employee-based healthcare. So therein lies the ultimate flaw of the employee-based healthcare system. Now, there are additional flaws to the employee-based healthcare system in that it doesn't cover everyone, right? And then we have a hodgepodge of other portions like the Affordable Care Act and the various state versions of it that try to take on the rest of that. But here we have a pandemic. We have a situation where if we don't take care of everyone, this pandemic isn't going away. I think that this is showing a spotlight on the need for a universal Medicare for all system that's going to cover everyone. It is also highlighting and spotting the need for a lot of other issues that we face right now. But I think that, you know, this is a critical point where we could actually reset the system right now. Now, I know that a lot of people are concerned about the economy. A lot of people are concerned about the jobs that are lost from the private insurance companies. And the fact of the matter is that a universal single payer Medicare for all system does kill and end that private health insurance industry. Now, when we look at doing a single payer Medicare for all system, we're looking at that is going to include a just transition so that we can have folks that are in the private health insurance company transition. Some will be received within the government system, but the rest of them need to be retrained or to have their transferable skills applied to some other industries. We should not have a private health insurance industry that profits on sick and dying people. We should have a single payer Medicare for all system. And again, South Korea is a good highlight of how it can be used to employed to combat serious pandemics like this one.
Hey, Albert, can I ask a follow-up question on the Medicare for all system? When we look around the world and we learn lessons from other industrialized nations, what do you think Italy did wrong in responding to their pandemic, and how can we learn as an international community from them that uses that more socialized form of medicine that we're talking about with a system like Medicare for all? How can we protect ourselves from something like that happening?
You know, I don't know really. I have to tell you, I don't know what exactly the details are when it comes to the Italian issue. As I understand it, a lot of folks did not heed the warnings and the advice early enough when it came to that. I understand that initially the pandemic reached the northern part of Italy, the more industrial part of Italy, which I guess kind of makes sense that if you're looking at industry and capitalism, that those are the folks that are going to be doing more of the traveling and mixing it up around the world. But as far as I understand it, a lot of folks didn't take the social distancing seriously and didn't think that it would affect them. And I have to admit that even here in our district, you know, we have gone out on our walks for exercise, and you know, we're keeping our safe distance from other folks, but it just doesn't seem like everybody is heeding, you know, the safe distance from one another. And, you know, I think additionally, you know, what we've seen so far is that the effects are more heavily, the impacts are more heavily affecting folks that are older or have immunocompromised systems, and that younger folks, healthier folks, may not register or show any kind of effects, but still may be carriers. I don't want to speak too much outside of my expertise because this, again, is a medical issue, and I think that we should defer to our medical experts when it comes to this, and to heed their instructions.
Hey, Albert, I have a question from It's Colin81 on YouTube. He asks, your social media portrays a very internationalist perspective, but I don't see a foreign policy platform. Can you tell us about that and your views on the growing concern over a nuclear arms race?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you for that question. I think that as we put together our social media and our website, there are so many different issues and areas of concern that is just one that wasn't listed. Now, obviously, we have talked about foreign policy a lot throughout our social media. And yes, I would absolutely echo that from my perspective, it is an international perspective. Now, when, typically when I talk about our foreign policy, I talk about our foreign policy as being two things. One, market driven, and two, white supremacist. Now, I'm going to kind of break down those two different issues. When we look at our foreign policy, it has always been the actions of the federal government have been geared toward the benefit of a select few. I typically use a couple of different examples when I talk about this, and I'll start off with a couple of examples from the 1950s. In 1953, 54, the United States employed its CIA to overthrow a peaceful government in Iran. And the reason for that overthrow was because that international sovereign decided to nationalize one of its resources, oil, which would be to the detriment of British and American oil companies who had deals with that regime. That in and of itself was short-sighted. It was for the benefit and for the profit of those British and American oil companies, and it has led to 70 years of hell to pay when it comes to relations with Iran. We're currently in some of the worst relations with that country right now. We are employing economic sanctions that actually do so much more harm to the people than it does to affect change. And I think that oftentimes our foreign policy is short-sighted. It is often market-based, and it is also based on white supremacy. And what I mean by that is just the idea or the concept that the United States is first among equals. So in international law, when we talk about sovereigns, when we talk about states, we're talking about states that are supposed to be equals, co-equals across the globe. But when it comes to the United States, when it comes to the way that we deal with a variety of different countries, there's sort of a pecking order of how equal they are to us. And we can look at the treatment that we have when it comes to proliferation. We have had states that have armed themselves with nuclear weapons, including, the big five, France, Great Britain, Russia, China, and the United States. And then as other countries have come on board, we've treated them differently. So when South Africa, when it was a white-ruled South Africa that had nuclear weapons, we didn't bat an eye. When we talk about a white-ruled Israel that, for the most part, everybody nukes, we don't talk about it. But when we talk about an Iran that pursues, or North Korea, these black and brown countries that are pursuing, we talk down to these countries. We tell them what preconditions they need to meet before we will come to the table to discuss with them. And that is in and of itself demonstrating that we do not treat those countries as co-equal sovereigns of this planet. My other example, 1954, Guatemala, the United Fruit Company was having issues with laborers who wanted to have a living wage. Now, that's sort of a mantra that we talk about on a regular basis here today. We need living wages here. for our American workers. But back in 1954, we had workers who were rising up because they were not receiving living wages. And United Fruit Company decided to go call on Uncle Sam and say, hey, you know, we got a situation down here. This is affecting our profits. And again, through our glorious CIA, through Operation PB Success, we took a democratically elected socialist government and overthrew it and installed a right-wing fascist dictatorship, which begat a series of right-wing fascist dictatorships up through the mid-1990s. Then we received, that country received a civil war. Meanwhile, we decided to export MS-13, a gang that was formed in Southern California, to Guatemala. A combination of all of those things created political instability that in turn caused a lot of their residents to leave and flee the country, many trying to reach the southern border of our country, where they were met with a Trump regime that says, go back to your own country and fix it. Now, that's just pure ignorance. It's pure ignorance on the part of the Trump administration. It is the short-sightedness and lack of understanding of our international history, of our American history, and how our actions have impacted and caused the ripple effect of issues that go on to this very day. So, when we're talking about our foreign policy, we're talking about one that is market-based. We're talking one that has been white supremacist-based. We need to change that. We have a situation here currently in the state of Israel where we provide military as well as financial aid to an apartheid state that is breaking international law today, that is harming the Palestinians both within their borders and within whatever rudimentary Palestinian state there remains within Gaza and the West Bank and the now seized Golan Heights. We need to have a government that is not going to continue to provide military aid to countries around the world, and really to use our humanitarian aid as the carrot in order to persuade the various regimes to reach and achieve more democratic institutions. I think that was a little long-winded, but I hope that answered the question. Let me know if that did or not.
It's Colin actually followed up. They asked, you said you volunteered for the Army. Why? How does that fit in with your anti-imperialist position?
Thank you for that question. It's an excellent question. And I got to tell you, our system is an all volunteer military, right? The reality is it isn't an all volunteer army. It is not an all volunteer military. It is a military that is comprised of the poor. It is a military comprised of those that do not have the means. When it comes to our military, less than 1.5% of our citizens have had the experience of living and working and serving in the military. For me personally, the issue was having school loans. Having school loans that were coming due, freaking out about that, not having the ability to pay forward on that. When I went into the military, I took the ASVAB. I scored in the 99th percentile, which basically qualified me to do any service skill, MOS. And initially, so I'll give you a little bit of background. When I was in school, I wanted to work in the foreign service. I wanted to work in the embassies. I wanted to be a part of that foreign policy to affect that change on the front lines. And I passed the test, but I couldn't afford to get to DC for the final assessments. That whole process took a year. This was at a time when the system was offered once a year. The test was also offered once a year. And I found myself in a situation where school loans were getting due. I was freaking out. I joined the military. When I joined, like I said, I was qualified to do anything. I tried to backdoor my way into the State Department by trying to get the MOS for foreign military attaché. But I was told that it was full. I asked, military intelligence, full. Linguists, full. All languages? Yeah, full. Okay, so what's open? Infantry, artillery, scout. Combat arms, open all day, 24/7. So, you know, the recruiters, the strip mall recruiters knew that they had me. They knew that I was freaking out about school loans, and they knew that they had exactly what they needed. So they signed me up for infantry, and I said, well, if I'm screwed and I'm going to be infantry, I might as well go all the way. So I signed up for Ranger School. I signed up for Air Assault, and I said, well, I guess I'm going to be stuck doing this. Now, when I was in basic training, and here's the worst of it all. When we talk about our all volunteer military, I was in basic training. Infantry, you know, it doesn't take a whole lot of skills to be an infantry soldier because you're effectively a bullet sponge. You don't need a 99 on the ASVAB, you need a 20. I think the average score of an infantry soldier was around there. But when I got there, there were all of these very young kids straight out of high school, some straight out of GED, because I think at that time they still allowed you to go in with a GED. And now my battle buddies, they were coming from rural Kentucky, Mississippi, Alabama, North Dakota. They were coming from really isolated and poor areas. Okay, my personal battle buddy came from Oklahoma, and you know, these kids, these were really just young kids. A lot of them were excited to be there. A lot of them were excited because it was the first time that they had permanent housing. It was the first time that they had clothing and meals on a regular. You know, I had some folks that I knew that came from homes that didn't have running water or electricity. When we got to the mess hall, there were kids that were just eat all of this food up, and I was just disgusted by it. And I watched as one kid made a sandwich with white bread and poured sugar on it and folded it up. And I asked him what that was, and he looked at me like I was stupid. And he was like, "That's a sugar sandwich." It's like, that's what we grew up with. And that's the kind of poverty, that's the kind of background that a lot of our fighting men and women come from. And so, yes, the military is their ticket, their escape from immense and deep poverty. And for me, my father, it was the same thing for him. He was coming from immense and deep poverty. And when he signed up in late 60s, early 70s, during the middle of the Vietnam War, it was because it was the only option. He could have waited for a short, a low draft card number to hit and go straight to Vietnam, or he could apply to join the military and hope for something better. Because as a Black man coming from Kinloch in North County, St. Louis, there was no opportunity for him for any other meaningful employment. Fortunately for me, he was selected as a mechanic and went to mechanic school, and then they shipped him off to Korea, which is, well, why I'm here today. So yeah, it doesn't square with my international perspective when it comes to foreign policy. When I look at our military, I think, you know, we have a military budget that is larger than the next 8 countries combined. We spend an inordinate amount of money, and a lot of that doesn't go to the servicemen and women, but it goes to the military industrial complex to build these elaborate, expensive toys that are never used, because quite honestly, we have dogfighting planes when we don't have enemies that have dogfighting planes. So we spend $300 million a piece on a plane that is never going to be used for the purpose it's going to be, that it was required or designed to be used for. We need to cut back our military spending. We need to, you know, attack the military industrial complex, something that Eisenhower talked about 70 years ago. We need to redirect those funds to rebuilding our infrastructure, to rebuilding our education, to reinvesting in America. And I think that we can. I think that when it comes to our foreign policy, you know, we have a Department of Defense. It's not a Department of Offense. And I think that we need to do everything we can to bring back our troops from the 80 or 90 plus countries that we have troops in right now, for, again, market-driven needs. Pull them back, use them for defense, and then convert those folks in our military to do the good work that is necessary here. We've got plenty of work that needs to be done on our infrastructure. Instead of wasting the money on expensive toys that collect dust and then get recycled, and then new toys replacing them, we can spend that money on bridges, on roads, on an internet superhighway, on making the internet a public utility, especially in our rural communities that that don't have the broadband necessary to conduct, everyday modern life. These are some of the things that we can do. So yes, I have the experience of being in the military, but I also have that experience because our all volunteer military is not exactly that.
So we've got another question from Ryan Fay. They ask, what plans do you have to get your message out to more people? Is there a way you might be able to debate him to show voters the stark contrast between the two of you?
Yes, I'd love to debate our incumbent, and we've from the very beginning. So I started this campaign last April, and when I started this campaign, it came with a great sacrifice. The reality is that running for office is a luxury for the wealthy. It has never been intended for regular, everyday Americans to do. Okay, it is expensive. It is something that it costs a lot of money because of the money in politics, the various hoops, and everything else. From the very beginning, we reached out to the incumbent to ask for a sit down, to say, out of respect, hey, I think I would like to challenge you for the right to represent the people of the 3rd District. And I knew some folks on his staff. I reached out to them and they said, we'll get back to you. About a week later, they said, well, the representative schedule is a bit busy. Now, back in July 14th, we had our kickoff. And our kickoff, we promoted that for over a month, okay? From the middle of June till July 14th, we promoted our kickoff, campaign kickoff, to happen on Bastille Day at 4 p.m. that Sunday. About a week before our kickoff, our incumbent decided to set up an emergency town hall on the climate. Now, he made it occur at exactly the same date and time, July 14th at 4 p.m. And he made an extra trip from Washington, D.C., flew on a jet to come over here to talk about our climate emergency, which, I thought was kind of ironic. So he was able to pull media away from our campaigns. They all went to go see him talk to 40 of his friends, mainly elected officials, at the Sierra Club, while we had about 300 folks show up to our event who had never heard of me, who have never heard of this campaign. And that was because of the enormous efforts of volunteers knocking on doors, dropping off pamphlets and flyers. And we had a great start to our campaign. Now, during that campaign kickoff, we asked for an open debate. And then right after the campaign kickoff, we sent formal letters to the incumbent, both at his campaign office as well as to his congressional office, neither of which were ever answered. Lastly, a couple months ago, I was at the CARE dinner where he was a guest speaker. I had the opportunity to meet up with him, and you can see on my Twitter page, because we pinned that little conversation, but I had the opportunity to speak to him directly. And he feigned ignorance of who I was initially. And I was like, Earl, I know you, you know me. I met you 8 different times. When are you going to debate? And he had to have one of his staffers save him from that simple question. And again, you can find that on our pinned Twitter page, Albert Lee 2020. So go ahead and take a look at it there. But long story short, yeah, we're not getting the coverage that is necessary. We have had the opportunity to speak to a lot of different media groups, from everything from Mondaweiss to the Willamette Week, Portland Tribune, Portland Observer, a variety of different online shows, including the Young Turks on The Conversation, and the Damage Report and the Humanist Report. But that's not enough. And unfortunately, because of the coronavirus and COVID-19, we're not able to continue our on the ground campaigning, which is unfortunate for us. So that's why we're doing things like this here today, to have an opportunity to talk to you directly, to give you the information for you to be able to share it out to others as well. So we're going to continue to do this. We have yard signs on the way that we hope to install at the various places for the folks that have been asking for it. Yeah, unfortunately, we have an incumbent who says that he's all about democracy, but is afraid of the institution, is afraid to have the open debates, is afraid to go one-on-one with a legitimate challenger. So again, we need money in order to be able to provide the information to go out to various advertisements, but we're also trying to do as much guerrilla marketing as possible. So that's a very long-winded answer, and I hope it kind of gave you an answer, but we're looking for contributions also. And again, we're not taking any corporate contributions. 100% of our contributions have come from the people. And then this is something that I want to highlight. So right now, as it stands, the incumbent has outraised us 10-1. Now, 65% of his contributions have come from corporations. If you add PACs to that, 90% of his contributions have come from corporations and PACs. If you take both of those two things away, we've raised just as much money as he has. Now, if you talk to him, if you go to his website, he talks about things like wanting to abolish Citizens United or overturn Citizens United, wants to have publicly financed campaigns so that we can diversify our leadership of all things. But he is unwilling to stop accepting corporate contributions, and he's unwilling to face a legitimate challenger, a diverse legitimate challenger, something that he claims to want to promote. So again, you can apply pressure as well by publicly naming and shaming the incumbent and reaching out to your friends and family and letting them know as well that what we have is a lip service progressive, someone who tells you what you want to hear, but actually does the exact opposite, who tells you that he's for publicly financed campaigns and wants to get money out of politics, but continues to take money from corporations. So, yeah.
A question on Instagram says, our representative is infamous for his climate policy. Why are you better equipped to deal with the climate catastrophe?
Yeah, so for one thing, I think you got to walk the walk that you talk. We have an incumbent who claims to have written the Green New Deal. That is pretty outlandish, first of all, such a claim, especially since the Green New Deal was something that has been in the works with the Green Party since the mid-1990s. Additionally, if you want to talk about the more recent history, is come out of other offices, not from our incumbent. Now, put that and you juxtapose that to the fact of the matter that he has millions of dollars in direct stocks with fossil fuel companies. I don't see how you can say you are for saving the planet on the one hand and then making money off of extractive resources on the other. For me, I don't hold any stocks on fossil fuels, and I won't. For me, I don't take corporate contributions, unlike our incumbent. I think that, from my perspective, from my lived experience, I understand the impacts, and I understand that the impacts hit marginalized folks to a greater degree than it ever will to people who are a part of the 1%. And, our incumbent is a part of the 1%. He's a multimillionaire. He didn't start off as a multimillionaire, but 24 years in office, his net worth increased over 20-fold. While the rest of us here in our district, our net worth has remained flat, and for most of us in marginalized communities, actually declined. I think that you've got to truly walk the walk that you talk, and that's something that I'm doing every day from the way that I'm running this campaign and moving forward. I had to step down from my position as a dean at Portland Community College in order to make this run because of the conflicts of interest there. I have not accepted any corporate contributions because I want to truly represent and fight for the people and not for corporations. I am a social justice activist that has worked with a wide variety of different organizations and not just join a membership, at the last minute. I think our incumbent joined the NAACP earlier this summer to build up his cred with with the Black community of Portland. Unbeknownst to him, the NAACP here is not really the center of the Black community of Portland. But when you're just scratching the surface, when you're doing the lip service efforts, that's what happens. When you don't see or really understand the community, that's the kind of thing that you would do.
I've got one, Albert. Matt is asking, I'm sorry. Matt asks, Congress is working on passing the EARN Act, a bill meant to strip encryption services away from companies. As our representative, how would you, excuse me, how would you protect the internet infrastructure for our communities?
Okay, what was the act?
The EARN It Act.
I'm not familiar with that act, but go ahead and read the question again.
Congress is attempting to pass the EARN Act, which would strip companies from the ability to create end-to-end encryption. What would you, as our representative, do to protect our internet infrastructure for all Americans?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that question. So, I think that I get the gist of the question. End-to-end encryption protects messages that are going from one party to the other without intrusion from, say, a government actor or some other nefarious third-party actor. Yes, we definitely need to hold and support and protect end-to-end encryption. And if I want to go a step further, over the last 20 years, when it comes to our privacy in general, our general privacy has been eroded over and over again for a lot of emergencies, a lot of different things that have come up when it comes to whatever is called terrorism or whatever, that has just eroded privacy for individuals. And I think that we need to do everything we can to rebuild and reshore privacy as well as the technology to do so. When we talk about, prior to COVID-19, we were talking about people that had returned to the United States from international trips, having various government agencies require them to open up their phones and stuff. That's a no-go. That's a no-go for me. And I think that we need to do everything we can to shore up our individual privacy and our personal rights. These are great questions so far. I'm surprised, and thank you guys for joining us. I know that we kind of threw this together last minute. I know that for our upcoming kind of town halls, we're going to do two things. We're going to provide a lot more notice, because I know that we gave you about 4 hours notice today. But we're going to try to give a little bit more notice, a couple of days in advance, for one thing. And number two, we're still working on the format, because like I said, right now we've got folks that are reading the questions that are coming in off of the different platforms, but I would really like an opportunity to have actual discussions with folks that are within our constituents within the 3rd district. So as we move forward, we're going to try to figure out ways that we can either connect individuals into our Zoom conversations, or if we can have something where we spotlight a constituent and have like a between the ferns kind of conversation, I guess, or something of that nature. But as we go forward, do we have any other questions that are coming up?
Yeah. You've endorsed Bernie Sanders for president. Why do you endorse Bernie over Biden or any of the other candidates?
Yeah. Okay. So I got to tell you that for me, back in 2016, 2015, Bernie Sanders activated and inspired me then. He was the first politician that I ever gave contribution to. He was the first candidate that I ever knocked on doors for, ever made phone calls for. He was the one that activated me and my wife. And the reason why he have activated me and my wife was that he was different from all the other politicians that we've ever experienced. Before that, I would never have given funds to any politician, because I considered politicians liars, thieves, and crooks. Doing things out of their own self-interest. And what I see in Bernie Sanders is a man who has, over the last 40 years, stuck to the same message, has always fought for the people, and has truly wanted to have a government that is of, for and by the people. When I look at him, I see integrity, I see truth, and I see something that you don't necessarily see often when it comes to politicians generally, which is standing your ground, truly believing in what your message is, and being able to build consensus. You know, I know a lot of people have this weird idea that Bernie's some old cantankerous old man that can't get anything done, but when he was in the House, I believe had the highest rating when it came to having bipartisan cooperation and bipartisan passage of bills. When I talk about him in 2020, I see the same person that I saw in 2015 and 2016. When I look at all of the other candidates, again, I just don't see the same integrity. I don't see the same truth. Now, you know, we're down to two now. We're down to Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. And in the last week with this COVID crisis, we have seen evidence of the integrity that Bernie has. He has effectively paused his campaign, has directed people to contribute to frontline organizations that are trying to combat this crisis. And he's trying everything he can to keep the people calm, to provide that effective leadership that we need during this time of crisis, when on the other side of the aisle with Trump, we've got madness, right? And we've got an absentee Joe Biden right now. I don't know why he's absent. Is it because he's incapacitated? Is it because he doesn't have an answer? I don't know. But that's not the kind of leadership that we need. And for you know, the way that the establishment candidates have all folded behind him and through their support behind him, that is just a demonstration to me of business as usual when it comes to the Democratic Party, when it comes to the people that are you know, who you have to ask the question, who benefits from these things? You know, I know that a while back I made this tweet where I talked about how the Democratic Party would actually probably prefer a second Trump term as opposed to a Bernie Sanders presidency. And I'll stick to that. I'll say it again right now, that I believe that to be true, because I think that they, the part of the establishment, benefit far greater when it comes to having a second Trump presidency than it does to a Bernie Sanders presidency. And the reason why I say that is because they can raise money against a Trump presidency. But if Bernie is the DNC presidential candidate and wins the presidency, he's going to tear things up. He's going to break the system that we have today, that has the money in politics, that has the, you know, the backdoor meetings, that has all of the different shenanigans that go on in the background. He's going to be supported by folks like AOC and Ilhan Omar, and hopefully folks like myself and other progressives that are jumping in, that are trying to provide true citizen representation of the people, as opposed to, you know, elite career multimillionaire politicians ruling over us. So yeah, so that's kind of it in a nutshell. I believe in Bernie. I guess I don't have to say it any other way than that. I believe in Bernie.
So you and the incumbent are both at least said to be progressives. I know you yourself are a progressive. People say Earl is a progressive as well. What are the first things that you're going to do when you get in office that you don't think that he's done so far?
Yeah, you know, we all say Green New Deal, we all say Medicare for all, we say all of these things. One of the things that I would like to see happen first and foremost is to get the money out of politics. Because again, I think that money in politics is the root of all evil. When it comes to that, I'm looking at HR 4000, which is Fair Representation Act. It is something that has been brought up by folks on both sides of the aisle. It is something that would provide ranked choice voting, so we're not stuck with this duopoly of Republicans and Democrats, that you can actually vote your conscience instead of voting the lesser of two evils. And it also would look at trying to restructure our representation so that we don't just have one representative per district, that we have multiple representatives per district, so that you can truly have a representative that, you know, believes in the things that you believe in. So what I mean by that is, like, right now here in the 3rd District of Oregon, we're 80% Democrats, right? That means there's 20% of the people out there that just aren't being represented. Now, if we had a district that had 2 or 3 representatives and you had ranked choice voting, you can get that to a point where you have somebody that's going to represent everybody within the district. So I think that that is one thing. And you couple that with publicly financed campaigns. You know, like I said, running for office is a luxury for the wealthy, or you have to be someone that's insane like myself that is risking everything. You know, I currently work a shift job from 5 in the morning to 1:30 in the afternoon, making a quarter of what I used to make in order to slow the hemorrhaging of my personal finances as I make this run. To a lot of people, that's insane. But for me, I'm looking at a future where we can go down 2 very bad paths. And right now we've got a 3rd bad path when it comes to this COVID crisis. But so long as we continue to have a ruling class ruling over us, instead of citizen representatives who truly know the struggle, who won't take corporate contributions, who will truly represent and fight for the people, we're going to continue down this really dark path. I think that we need to diversify our representation. We need to get subject matter experts that aren't lawyers, that aren't, you know, career politicians. We need doctors, we need lawyers, or doctors and scientists as representatives, people that know something about the environment, not just the 1% who's there to pad their pockets. I mean, we've got what, 4 or 5 senators now that are getting charged with insider trading, or not charged with insider trading because it's not illegal apparently for members of Congress to do insider trading, but who have taken the information that they received during sensitive and private security briefings and used it for their own benefit. I mean, that's the kind of thing that we are disgusted by. That's the kind of thing that I think Americans in general are disgusted by. But for the most part, we just throw our hands up in the air and we say, well, you know, this is bullshit. You know, that this is the kind of thing that we can't have because we have these politicians. We need to get rid of politicians. We need to have citizen representatives.
So if elected, you will be Oregon's 3rd district's first person of color representative. How will that affect the decisions you make compared to the all-white representatives we've had in the past?
So here's the thing. As a representative, you should be a representative of all the people. Yes. And I think that generally speaking, that's what representatives try to be. They try, for the most part, to be representative of the people that they're their constituents. That being said, you know, we all have blind spots. We all have different perspectives. We all have different lived experiences, and I think that it would bode well for the 3rd district to have someone that is not cut from the same cloth. Because right now, in our federal delegation, we've got 2 senators, we have 5 representatives. 100% of them are multimillionaires. 100% of them are over the age of 62. 100% of them are property owners, and 100% of them are white. And that simply isn't representative of our state, where, you know, less than, or 44% of us are not homeowners, we're renters, where a good quarter of us are not dominant culture, not white, where a good 75% of us are below the age of 62. And, you know, less than 1.4% of us are millionaires. So I think that by having me as your representative for the 3rd district, I'm going to provide a different background, a different perspective, a different lived experience that's going to be able to see some things that the rest of our representatives simply can't because of their vantage point. You know, I think that it would be very good to have somebody who has worked on minimum wage, who knows what shift work is, who has served in the military, who was born elsewhere, who was born an immigrant, who has lived in different parts of this country and different parts of this world. I think that you know, we've had 13 members of the House of Representatives from the 3rd district. I believe it was 13. 11 men and 2 women, all white, and the majority of them came from the 1%. so long as we have, again, so long as we have rule by a ruling class, we truly don't have democracy. And we're not going to get to the workable solutions that we need by having everybody cut from the same cloth.
One of the most polarized issues at the moment is the Israel-Palestine conflict. What do you think about in terms of Palestinian rights and Israel's claim to the land?
Yeah. So I fall, and this is one of those places where I differ from the incumbent wholeheartedly. I firmly support BDS, which is boycott, divest, and sanction the state of Israel, because I believe that the state of Israel is an apartheid state. Okay, it is a state that has abused the human rights of the Palestinian people, both within their borders and outside of their borders. We have effectively open air prisons within the state of Israel. We have occupied territories that have continued. They continue to build on occupied territories. They continue to abuse the rights of the people, and the citizens, the Israeli Palestinian citizens of the state of Israel, are treated as second-class citizens. Now, the United States, again, cumulatively has provided more military aid to the state of Israel than any other country. And that in and of itself violates some of the acts that we have, where we're not allowed to provide aid to people who are abusing human rights, who are doing the things that the state of Israel is doing. Now, one of the big things that I want to highlight, because I know that there's somebody out there that's going to call me anti-Semitic, there is a difference between the state of Israel and Jewish people. The state of Israel is an apartheid state. The citizens, the Jewish people, are separate from that. Do not conflate those two things. I know that there has been a talking point from AIPAC and from others that try to conflate and confuse and try to say that they're one and the same. They are not. Again, like the acts of the United States in its foreign policy is different from the American people. So I want to distinguish that really quickly. But yes, that is a huge thing that I differ when it comes to the incumbent. I don't think the incumbent is willing to go that far to call out the state of Israel. But I think that it needs to be reined in. I think that we need to pull our military aid and intervention from the state of Israel. And I think that we need to pull, quite frankly, military aid from all countries around the world and employ humanitarian aid as a carrot to help affect the change that we're looking for to promote democracy around the world.
The incumbent has missed 4.2% of his roll call votes, which is almost double the current congressional lifetime average of 2.2. And in November to December of 2006, he missed 59% of his votes. What would you do in Congress to ensure that you're there to vote for us?
I don't plan on missing votes. I think that's kind of an important thing to do. I think that's one of the things that demonstrates, where your positions are, and also something for which the constituents can rank and decide whether you should be there for another 2 years. Unfortunately, when we have super gerrymandered districts, when we have the money in politics, the combination of those two things make for super safe seats. Look, the 3rd district has not faced, our incumbent has not faced a serious challenger ever. It's been there since 1996. Okay. So he doesn't need to necessarily work, right? He can coast. He can coast so long as there isn't somebody willing to challenge. And we have a system here where we have effectively a one-party state, where we have a machine where people are waiting in the wings, waiting for him to either retire or die before they go up and throw their name in the list, because that goes against the social mores of the Democratic Party of Oregon. But here's the thing. I'm not doing this for the Democratic Party of Oregon, and I'm not doing this for a career. I'm looking at the very serious issues that we are facing and saying enough is enough, and I don't have faith in the current representation. And I think that we can do a lot better, and we should do a lot better, and we're running out of time. Is that it?
I think that'd be a wrap.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that was a pretty good first 1 hour, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, tell you what, thank you all for participating in this. Like I said, as we go forward, we're going to try to figure out ways where we can have this even more fluid, because I want to have the ability to really talk to you face to face. And I know that we can't really do that here right now, but this is the second best thing. So we're going to try to provide significant notice for the next one that comes up. And we'll go ahead and try to figure out what we're going to do in order to make it even more interactive. Here's one thing that I'd like to do is I would like if you would want to have a discussion with me live on social media. Go ahead and send Joshua an email, and you can reach Joshua at joshua@albertlee2020.com, and he can add you to a list, and we can figure out timing and everything to see if we can get you to join us on subsequent versions of this kind of town hall. But again, thank you all for joining us tonight, and we look forward to doing more of these. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and sign off here. You guys stick around, but I'll sign off from YouTube at this point. Thanks, everyone, and have a great night.
Yep.